Hello, thanks for having me, everybody. I feel very privileged to be here among loads of my favourite museums. So the first thing to say is that I'm an artist. I don't represent an institution or an organisation. I'm just an individual who works within a number of fields. So I thought before I presented the Mobile Museum, I'd give you a little meandering romp through how I got to that point rather than just presenting it in isolation. So these are some images of some of my work, some things that I've documented, things I'm interested in. So I'm from a fine art sculpture background, but I'm very much interested in, I guess at the very heart of my research, the relationship that people have with place. Very much entrenched within the city. London is changing massively amongst us, all cities are changing, and how we interact with them and move around with them, particularly in the built environment, is changing every day. So as an artist, I see myself as being a sort of documenter of this, an observer. I lurk, for want of a better, more academic expression. I normally work on a commission basis or residencies within museums or institutions, but more often than not over the last 5 years, it's been a process of self-directed projects, me sourcing funding, fundraising, often in dialogue with local authorities and in response to things that are happening around. So this, for example, is a residency I did at the London Borough of Enfield's archives. I've got a list of words which I always come back to within my research and my practice, and I'm constantly trying to thrash out what these mean as an artist. And they've all been said today, actually, in different contexts, which I think is quite interesting. So regeneration, participation, consultation, collaboration, community, engagement, legacy, and resilience. So I suppose I'm trying through my practice to see how I can actually put these things into rigorous testing modes and actually try and do what I say on the tin, rather than just wheeling them out to satisfy clients or to secure funding or as a way to get people to participate. They seem to be used quite often as aspirational terms, of how to describe work rather than the experience of making and viewing or experiencing work. So this slide, if you go back to about 10 years ago, the Mobile Museum is very much site-specific. Most of my work is site-specific, but I'm very aware of the fact that the audience of who experiences the work, I want the work to make sense to people beyond the local context. So this is in Barking in East London, where I've had an ongoing accidental love affair for about 10 years because I used to work for an architecture practice called Muff Architecture Art as an artist, and I started to go there working on this project, The Folly, and I haven't really stopped. So the Mobile Museum, this is it, a long time ago. In brief, so it's a very long-winded story. I'd love to say it was a really simple process, but I think part of the narrative and part of why I'm here is that, I guess, what does it actually take as artists to make work among today's political climate and a very funding, hammered public sector orientated world, without compromise as well, because I don't want to compromise the quality of the work for both me and the people participating. So I was approached in 2011, a really long time ago, to think about making a piece of work that responded to the Olympics, because Barking and Dagenham had just found out that they were a late addition to be a host borough. It might have even been 2010, but maybe I'm in denial about how long ago that was. I thought that was a bit tangential because it's a bit late in the day, and also Barking and Dagenham, I don't know how many, let's have a show of hands, how many people know Barking and Dagenham, have been there? Yeah, I personally love it. I'm not from London, I'm from the West Midlands, but for me it's like this melting pot that represents everything that's going on in London at the moment. If you want to find out what's happening to our cities, you need to go to the edges and the bits and the peripheral and see what's happening. It's fascinating. It's got a really strong track record of housing, left-wing government, left-wing local government, but also they had the first BNP member there a few years ago. So it's a really interesting place. I obviously said, no, I don't want to do something Olympic-based because that would be a bit tangential, but I'll develop something that actually thinks about legacy in the long run. So my proposal was really quickly just to make a mobile museum. And I mean, I made this proposal not really thinking through how this was going to happen. Well, I did, but it was very detached from the reality of how this thing happened. So I had some match funding from the local authority. They gave me some money to generate a proposal. I got given a big chunk of match funding, and then I got £27,000 from the Arts Council. Fast forward 6-9 months, I went to sign contracts at the local authority to be told that the match funding had been cut because of the public sector cuts. I don't take this personally. This is just what's been going on, and I think in the grand scheme of things, my Pithy art project versus what's going on in the public sector. At the time it was the end of, it felt like the end of the world and there was a lot of tears, but in hindsight it's made my project much better and it's given me a lot of freedom. So I decided to do a Kickstarter. It wasn't that simple. It took me about a year to come to this decision because I kind of touted myself across London trying to raise the funding from other sources. So we went to the GLA, various people, but I was quite keen to retain autonomy. I actually saw the fact I'd lost the local authority funding as a bit of a release, that I could use this as a way to completely retain autonomy within the project and try and make work that was neutral. So a new museum that's very neutral, outside of a council agenda or an institutional framework. I was really taken by what Cathy said earlier, how you inherited these institutional habits and institutional outlooks. So I only had individual habits and individual outlooks, and I used that very much to shape the work. So I was keen to hold on to that. So I did a Kickstarter, and I thought I'd show you the campaign video. Just because there's no sound, there's some ambient droning somewhere which you can hear. How you can communicate a project, a piece of work that's so conceptual and inside my brain to people and get them to buy in, to give me money. I was very aware that the audience for the Kickstarter was not, I wasn't going to get most of my funding from residents from Barking and Dagenham, because one of the main issues is that people in Barking and Dagenham don't have much money. And also culture is very low on the priorities. The whole project grew out of the idea that the local sector's museum services have been really hammered and they're really dislocated from where the town hall is and the civic centre. So to act as like this Mohammed in the Mountain option will take culture out to residents. So I devised a route based upon the old mobile library that used to operate in Dagenham in the 50s, that used to tour around council housing estates. And to tour, basically the proposal then was to just tour these 12 estates and construct a new natural history collection, kind of in celebration of the everyday, with residents as I go along. So it's part mythologised, part fact, but also very playful. Yeah, so the video, I was very keen. I mean, it makes me feel quite pained when I watch some people's Kickstarter crowdfunding videos where it's just a talking head telling you everything, what they're going to do and how great it's going to be for X, Y, Z. So I thought as an artist I need to make it look, like my work, because I make film. But it worked. I managed to raise £1,000 more than my target of £7,400, so I got £8,500, which I was delighted by. Let's see how long is left of this. So these are all the estates in chronological order, and I think one thing that the borough used to do really well was housing. They completely smashed it for a long time. They've got Becontree estate there, which is the LCC's sort of, I mean, it's wonderful. It was Europe's largest planned council estate for a really long time, and then some other very good quality council housing estates. A lot of them are still around. I think what was interesting for me about the Kickstarter process is thinking about audience. The delays allowed me a lot of time and as an artist it was really frustrating to actually filter out what the work was going to be. So I was getting really good feedback. I ended up having 343 backers from all over the world. I've mapped it and it's fascinating where they all come from, and they cross lots of different disciplines, so architecture, geography, history, museums, art, and they're just people that like London or like cities. So I kind of got really interested in that, how this project maybe had some legs to be. So there was going to be two audiences. There's going to be the local, more participatory audience that would experience and help construct the collection, and then there'd be the more academic, distant audience who could reflect upon the project and the collection. And I used social media quite a lot to establish those parameters. And I'm now at the point, sort of a year on after launching, of inviting the distance audience to come and experience the work as participants. Okay, you get the gist. It's all online. You can drown yourselves with it if you want another time. So this is what it looks like now from the outside. It's an old mobile library from Wales, which was decommissioned in the late 2000s. So the icons, I was very interested in how I could represent a museum through a series of objects that are both very locally embedded, but would also read in an audience such as yourselves in central London as being quite obviously a mobile museum, a selection of things. So from left to right, you have the sporran of the Dagenham Girl Pipers, you have the clock tower of Barking Town Hall, you have the Ford Capri that used to be made in Dagenham, a Becontree Arch, the Chadwell Heath whalebone, the facade of the Civic Centre, Ford Windmill, a piece of asbestos, because one of the housing estates was built on Cape Asbestos, a huge works, Dagenham Docks, map of London with the borough coloured in, the Barking Mammoth's pelvis, which is this wonderful mythologised item, the only remains of which are two villas, two houses that are built called Mammoth Villas, and various archive pictures of the finding of this mammoth's pelvis, but people don't know where it is. A football, because there's loads of footballers there, and the council always love to say how they won the World Cup. Tom Dixon lights for the town centre, which is a nod to my entrance to the borough. Votes for women. Obviously, the Ford Machinist strike, 1968, was quite seminal in equal pay. And then the sluice gate at Dagenham Dock. So this is what it used to look like. Very obviously a mobile library. Oh, I'll show you that, yeah. The Horniman Walrus. I see this as being really like my spirit guide for the project in many respects, because in times of real horror and darkness in the project and existential crises of being an artist, being quite indulgent with it not going the way it was going, I'd constantly go back to the Horniman Museum. I went on a bit of a roadshow of lots of different galleries of how they displayed like natural history, and I started to get obsessed with the walrus being this emblem of mythology and playfulness in many respects, because it shows how it's just not true. You know, it's overstuffed because they'd never seen a real walrus, but everybody takes it as face value that this is a specimen, which it is. So I got really obsessed with this idea of how I can, as an artist, be very playful with that, and it's the way that I present it and frame it that will give it rigour. This is the newer collection at Eton's Natural History Museum, which is also great. Spines. So yeah, I got very obsessed. This is me. I had to do an LGV driving test, which I passed, thankfully, because it was really expensive. But all the things that I just didn't think about. So when I was writing my Arts Council application, I was like, yeah, no problem, I'll just apply. That's fine. Basically, if you pass your test after a certain date in 1999, you have to take a new test, and I passed my test 2 months late, too late. So this is the map of the borough, which maps out the estates that I've been trundling. It's in the middle of the process at the moment. I've been trundling around. This is the Dagenham Librarian of 1953. So as a byproduct of losing funding and potentially just becoming my own client, along with 343 Kickstarter funders, I was able to shape and change the project as I went along and kind of filter things out. So I decided to establish a lending library, which I themed. I did a call out basically across London, across my network and across the Kickstarter network, because I knew there was a lot of academics and interested people within that network to submit books, give me books that responded to these subjects, so to do with the city, collecting, London, architecture, art, and I now have a lending library which is free to join. It's open every Wednesday at Valence House in Dagenham, and it's a trust-based library, and I'm very happy if a book gets stolen because it means that it's out there. These are some of the examples of some of the objects that I've been collecting. So thinking about just the details, the bits, and I do quite a lot of work within demolition contexts, which has obviously informed the collection. Built materials, the actual things that our buildings of a certain time have been built from that are disappearing. So everyone that used to live at Goresbrook Village, one of the first things they talked about was this red flooring. It became synonymous with the estate. The tiles, they just describe what colour floor they lived on. Instead of being the 7th floor, it'd be like, I live on the pink floor or the blue floor or the yellow floor, which again I thought was a really lovely social detail. These slides are all over the place. I can only apologise for being so unprofessional. This is the driver's eye view. So I've used the colour series of the Horniman as a thinking of the taxonomy that they use it with for showing natural history evolution, but to use my timeline is the evolution of council housing in the borough, but also in London. This is it looking from, I'm stood by the serving counter. So I've built this. I've really injured myself doing it. I've learned a lot doing it, but I wanted to make something really beautiful so that you had this experience, only like how I can describe how you'd feel when you walk into the Enlightenment Gallery at the British Museum for the first time, where you just feel like you have to behave in a certain way and there's a certain respect to the objects and the formality. That's me on the launch. I had a horrific accident the day before, which, I mean, a really horrific accident. So I am out of it on painkillers, but I was literally, the thought of saying there was going to be another delay was non-negotiable. And I was just talking to somebody outside about this, about the resilience and the need to dig deep. And I just thought, well, everything's done, everything's ready. I've got loads of codeine. I can get a taxi. And all I had to do was just go and smash it and open it. This is the other way round, the other view. This is parquet flooring from a school in Peckham. On the right-hand side, you see these are little models that I've made, which show, they're all to scale, which show the evolution of council housing. So from the newest are at the bottom, and I think what's interesting to see the whole model is how they swell. They go from being really small to massive, back down to quite small again. So I have various displays. This is a taxonomy of aggregate and paving from each of the estates, because there's people like to talk to me a lot about the paving and patchiness, but I just quite like the idea of the Roman roads being really important. There's one in Chadwell Heath. What's not to say that this will be really important in 100 years' time? Again, like what you were saying about, I can't remember who was saying this, about the when curators used to second guess and imagine and rapid collect. I'm really fortunate that I don't have the space to rapid collect, so I have to make very intuitive decisions about what I display. This is a piece of fake asbestos that I made out of some aggregate and a piece of weave from Barking Market. So it's asbestos and muscovite, and these are some of those models. So one of the main, the collection is co-authored, and it's been a very generous process steered by me. I've been designing workshops that are very specific to each estate's context. So for Becontree, the Dagenham idol is stored in Valence House Museum, so we did a make-your-own Dagenham idol for a contemporary Barking and Dagenham. For the Leys, I've done an archaeological dig in the demolition site with council workers, residents, a big mix of people, and also I've started to invite some boffins and also people from my network to come and do the work with me. Doing a rubble life drawing class on the Gascoigne estate in about a month because it's being demolished. So lots of, because it's quite a punt, and I think what I've been amazed by is people's ability to buy into it and get on board with it. I haven't, and I can guarantee every project I've done in Barking and Dagenham before now, I've had a lot of people saying, this is shit, who's paying for it? The council should be doing this. Me being an agent of the council, I haven't had a single person say that to me, which I take that as being I take that really seriously. And I think that's because of the transparency of the project, allowing everybody to actually contribute and make the collection. It's also a weed survey. These are some of the people I've worked with. Legacy, I've got 1 minute to talk about legacy and what happens next. So I've got 4 more estates to go, starting in about 3 weeks' time. So one thing I was really, when I lost the funding, I lost my project management. I lost the people that would whip me into shape and ensure best practice. But I'm fairly confident that I've actually put myself under more pressure, the fact that that's been removed. So I've established a trust as a community organisation where I've got 5 boffins from selected fields. So I've got the head of an architecture degree, a professor in fine art, the head of heritage from the local authority, lots of different disciplines, participation expert, along with 5 residents, and they act as my sounding board. And we meet every 2 months, and I talk them through where I'm up to and what they think. But also now I'm at the stage of thinking about the exit strategy, what happens next. Obviously, I can't keep this thing. There's funding implications, it's huge, and also what happens when this initial tour finishes, then what? I don't want to drive around replicating the same activities, and I'm not sure that there's the funding to keep that. This is my protest banner that we made on Keir Hardie Way, which is an estate. So it's named after Keir Hardie. I'm sure everyone knows who he is. Thinking about protest, but in the most everyday way, because I see the whole project as being now a kind of form of protest in terms of funding mechanisms, and as artists how we have to wear all of the hats to get things done. So I made this with a bunch of residents where I asked them just what were the things they'd like to go to the town hall and complain about. And these were the responses. And then we did a procession through the green in the middle of the estate. I'm all over the internet. You can find me there. I've missed loads out, but yeah, time's up.